Great to have you here for this on the work of Adolph Menzel, who remains almost unthinkably an obscure artist. It is likely that he felt socially estranged for physical reasons alone. He had a large head and stood about 4 feet 6 inches tall. I'm reminded of another artist, and his name is John H. Vanderpool. I think there's something about Menzel and Vanderpool which, despite the physical challenges, those artists, those geniuses were able to aspire to tremendous reputations, legends, accomplishments. It almost looks more impressive because there are so many disparate versions of this hand here or of that hand there, changing. Talk about being a little thrown by model movement as you discuss this with your colleagues, your students, your instructors. Here's a person that really capitalized on the motion in the model. You can clearly see the graphite pencil on the left and how it's being manipulated and managed, walking through these immense environments which have a lot of living in them. They've got a lot of erosion, a lot of life that has transpired. And I think he really embraces that, not only here, but also in this absolutely mind boggling drawing on the right side of another environment where you can see the pencil being used. This is graining, by the way. This is graining and stumping. This gives you that just incredible slice that I think we've all seen versions of when we've gone to those exotic places in Europe, those medieval towns, the places where the cobblestone streets meander and ebb and flow in their own particular way. Those are my favorite places in Europe to visit. Now that we've started out with some of that and we've investigated some of the pulverization of the substance, some of the graining, this business of variability of handling, let's see what can happen as we go into that ear. And I just want you to grab a section of any drawing, please, with me. I've got that chisel tip. Can you see it? This is the way I practice it. Since I've been playing with the Gikoso, I'm rotating the tip a little bit this way and that way. And having done quite a bit of sketchbook work, I find when I'm in the moment drawing, let's say in an environment, in a real-time situation, I will find a tip like this one, and then I'm almost dedicated to that. You can already hear that there's a slightly more severe sound to that. That's because the graphite in this pencil has been compiled as an amalgamation of clay and graphite. And as I get to something that is a lot softer in this one, I have far less of that inert clay in the amalgamation. And because of that, this stuff is going to move. Let's go after some of that as a test. Using varying line weight, varying line pressure, the edge of the pencil, the broad side of the pencil with that chisel tip, much like a carpenter's pencil. Wherever it seems to be most advantageous for you, try it out and see if you can get your own shifting stance to give you what you're after. Just again, as a test. Abide by that chisel tip. That's what they call this, a chisel tip, because it is linear and thin and broad and thick. So what I do with that is I sharpen my Gikoso down by just scraping more readily on one side, and then I flip it and I scrape it more completely on the other side. And then once I'm there, I give it a slight pitch that way. That's how I do it. And so I think that's essentially the next step in the development of the drawing as you build up even more of that proficiency in this amazing drawing, this master drawing. I'd like to siphon off as much of these placement marks as I possibly can and get them to actuate what's there before I get into some of the fun of it. When you're doing a master copy, in my opinion, you're almost like an actor playing a role. This is really staring at an eye through Menzel's creative lens. This right here, by way of contrast, is completely outside the norm, the orthodoxy of graphite. It slides, it smears, it scrapes, it agonizes its way into a glorious being. Great example of the spirit of the mark. Don't have to nail it exactly, but to get the right feel is to gain that advantage and that awareness of how the artist is really balancing the linear flair for the sake of a textural and really, moreover, an expressive effect. How much does the scale have to do with your comprehension and your performance of the material, knowing what you do about its general application? His choices on lips, his choices on shadows, on edges are things that you don't see in other centuries. If you copy an 18th century French drawing, you're going to get a whole different set of very inspiring conventions that are going to change the way that you appreciate what you're seeing and how the natural order of things works. We'll try it on him, and if it doesn't suit our purposes, we'll try it on the previous drawing just to see. But I don't think it's going to stick perfectly to graphite, but it'll go in some manner. It's certainly worth trying out. And that will create something, once again, I use the word of an emulsified substance. It's part pure graphite, it's part something else, and maybe it's got something to contribute to the overall effect of that combination, that layering question. And I don't think you have to go too nuts here to try to nail down every single fold. I don't really think that's going to necessarily help. I think what's happening in this region is quite similar to the rest of the drawing, and that is an attempt to create a surface effect. How much abrasive drawing do you want to record? How much smooth passage making do you want to depict? It's all up to you, and the question would be ultimately how to employ that in your own pursuits. That makes for a more tactile feel for things along this edge. An exploration of what Menzel was offering and what he continues to say to us beyond the grave.